on there. And so yeah, thank you for recording. I think the goal here will be once we kind of wrap this up, and then for everyone else, obviously that also isn't able to attend down the line, we'll be able to share that out. But yeah, we're excited. And Lyle, we have most likely a few people keep trickling in, but as you have the floor, feel free to kind of take it away, and we're excited to get started.
You want to give a couple minutes? I mean, over 35 people signed up for this, and like nobody's here. So
yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Take some time. We can kind of go through and
we can start on the 5-minute mark. Sometimes we do that. And if everybody wants to, I know everyone kind of knows each other here because we're all part of the Gilder community, but if anyone wants to, give intros where they're calling out of what they do, feel free. I know a lot of people are eager to get to know others in this community.
Sounds good. Yeah, feel free to drop it in the chat or, even unmute, right? We've got a small little group here to kind of kick it off, and it's good to kind of see everyone's faces. So I know we've got people all over the coasts and different places, and Allison looks like she's kind of getting a good workout in too while she's getting some energy. So love to hear it. Ediolo, how are you doing? Good to see you. Carol, how are you? Everything out good in your neck of the world? Perfect.
Lisbon.
That's right.
I love Lisbon. What a great city.
It is. I love it. That's why I chose to live here, because I'm from Brazil and I've been living here for 5 years.
I would love to go back. I had such a good time there.
It is amazing. It's a beautiful place.
Beautiful people too.
Yeah, very friendly. And we have high quality of life. Everything is so peaceful here.
Peaceful's good.
Yeah, it is.
Carol, I have a question for you. I was actually talking to someone the other day who's an American who's actually married to someone from Brazil. And I have an obsession with rodizio. And he told me that it's actually not pronounced rodizio. It's actually pronounced with an H. Is that true? It's like in terms of like Portuguese.
Let me think. Rodizio.
Yeah. Is that the way to pronounce it?
Rodizio. I would say zio. Rodizio.
Okay. Okay, got it. I never knew that. I kept saying with an R, so.
Yeah, this is the famous thing about the other day we have. Okay.
Perfect. Well, yeah. And I think as kind of an update here too, before we kind of kick off here in a little bit, for everyone else, we've got 2 more sessions here for the kind of rest of the year as we close everything out. And so we've got our calendar for 2025 already mapped out. So we're excited to share more of that during the happy hour and holiday session here in December. So I know everyone's kind of got, no matter where you are, holidays and stuff for Thanksgiving and then Christmas and everything else we're celebrating. So we'll kind of make sure we work around that and have a lot of fun stuff going on. So, Lyle, I think people always usually end up tending to trickle in a little bit later, but, we can kind of take the time with, if you want to even just give like an intro, we can always dive in a little bit. But for everyone else here, it's great to see a lot of your faces. And, Tyga, Michael, and I are always here as resources in the chats. And we're very thankful to have Lyle take us through this amazing session.
Tyga, can you give me a screen share?
And I want to give a shout out to Allison Norman, who's on the treadmill, but here to listen. So way to work hard. Appreciate it.
I feel like we need to get those walking desks, or, now I feel lazy just kind of sitting in my chair over here. So.
I think you should be able to share your screen, Lyle.
I worked out right before this just to get a credit.
Kudos to you too, Bennett.
All right. Everybody can see this?
Yes, sir.
That's good.
Yeah. Okay. So thanks for having me. I appreciate y'all letting me be here. It's great to be part of the Gilder community. And it's great to have a chance to sort of talk about where my passions are and what I'm all about. Give you a really condensed background because this is a short session. I grew up in integrated communications in the brand development side of the world and built a $170 million agency that I exited from and sold to Havas, which is a French holding company. I went on to run a couple of tech companies and really sort of got a real interest in developing early stage businesses and value creation and figuring out how to scale, and did that for a while and founded an investment bank, which is a kind of a weird crossover for somebody with a creative background, but it was a space that I loved and did a lot of work with private equity and venture capital. We represented about 600 million in funds through Sylvan Ventures in Baltimore and did a lot of M&A work. And when I founded BRANDThink, the goal of that was to sort of combine the pragmatic side of value creation, building businesses, scaling businesses, and combining that with the understanding of the value of building brand equity and what that does to performance and what that does to value. So that's what we're going to try to cover today. And for me, this is fundamental stuff that a founder should be aware of. And I'm going to try to take you through something that will reframe the context with which you think of what a brand is. We're going to cover what is a brand, how they're built, what are the intangibles that drive value, what are the range of the benefits that come from focusing on this, the role strategically of positioning in creating a brand, and how you actually implement this in practice. I will say that there's a lot of stuff to cover in this that we can't possibly do today, but this is a great precursor for the 4 sessions that are coming up in January, which sort of Gilder has a new format for the innovation roundtables. So I encourage you to sign up for those, where we'll go through a lot of this stuff in considerably more detail. So where do we begin? Well, when people use the word brand, invariably they're thinking about logos and colors and identities and things like that. And that's the common way to think about it. People go, I'm a branding agency and they do design. And the truth is that brand is a strategy before it's any kind of brand extension or execution, which is really what logos and identities and colors and all that stuff is. Those are extensions of a brand strategy. And so the best way to think of it is that a brand is actually a construct with which you're trying to own space in people's minds. And that happens through a lot of ways. We'll talk about some of those things. But as a leader of a company that you're trying to build and grow value in, I think it's wise to think of brand always as being a servant to the business strategy. Everything needs to be aligned. So to frame it, if you think about what is actually equity, it is this group of enduring and shared perceptions in the mind of people. It's what people believe about who you are. Brands have rational sides and they have emotional sides, and they're both tangible and intangible. So when you think about the power of a brand relationship, there are rational components and there are emotional components. When I buy a car, it's going to check all the boxes. It's an EV. It has good performance. It does these things. At the end of the day, we make emotional decisions and we buy some things based on emotional. The intangible attributes of a brand that are buried in equity, that create long-term sustainable value, are some of the most significant drivers of financial value. And if you neglect thinking about those things, you are not really leveraging one of the most important assets of your business. To really build a brand and understand how it works, we have to understand people, and we understand human nature. We have to know how our memory systems work. How do we retain information? How do we remember something? In the case of a business, core value propositions, the things that differentiate me and make me chosen over somebody else. How do we remember those things? How do we make purchase decisions? How does a brand first become aware, go into a consideration, and then get to preference? How does that path happen? It's important to remember that building brand is a philosophical idea as much as anything else, because a lot of the intangibles that create financial value, true measurable financial value, are not easily measurable and not easily put on a P&L. So that really means that it's up to you guys who are running a business and building a business for the long term. It's a leadership idea. It's how do I run the business with a brand-centric operating philosophy? How do I run my business so that every experience that my customers have are reinforcing a consistent position in the marketplace? Because that consistency is how you build equity. So, and it's not really a complicated thing. It's just something that needs to be front of mind. Building equity happens at every point of engagement in a company. But everything that you do, every user experience, every feature set, every design, has to reinforce the consistency of the position. I mean, think of Apple. Every experience you have of Apple, whether it's unboxing a product or experience at a Genius Bar or the elegance of their OS or their hardware design, everything for as long as you can remember that brand has been consistent at every point of engagement. That core equity needs to be reinforced internally and externally. So you always want to consider that your internal people are your first and most important constituent, right? Those are the people that are responsible for fulfilling your brand promise, and they need to be the first people to be able to reinforce a brand position. So in order to do that, you have to have a single-minded core position that everybody is aligned against. That is the core formula of building equity. It's consistency plus time is what creates equity. And you can't have consistency if you don't have alignment. And that really means that everybody is marching to the same tune, has the same understanding of what makes your company differentiated, what's your core value proposition, why are you preferred over anybody else. That is together how consistency happens. So it's a long game. I think it's important for people to get that it's not something that is mired in, near-term analytics or KPIs. Even though we're so caught up in this performance metrics mentality, you have to understand that building equity that turns into money when you're at a negotiating table and you go to flip a business or you're trying to improve the multiple on a transaction, that's a long game. And so that means you got to think of it early and play it consistently over time. So what are all these intangibles that drive financial value? These are things that are not easily measured, but these are emotional connections. They're brand love, their preference, they're everything that leads me to the purchase funnel from consideration to preference to purchase. It's about a salience and affinity and loyalty. And if you build those kinds of values in not only your employees, but in the marketplace, you then build a world of advocates who are aligned because they know how to speak to what your brand is and they are advocates for what you do. All these intangibles are very important and not easily measured. And I think fundamentally that's a problem that a lot of leadership struggles with, because you can't have a specific KPI for a long-term sense of loyalty. You can measure customer loyalty and repeat purchases and some of those metrics over time, but year over year, it's not easy to do, which is sort of loops back to why building brand is as much a leadership best practice as it is anything that's specifically tangible. Brand value versus brand equity. One of the struggles that the industry has had for a really long time is trying to accurately measure what is the return on investment if I'm trying to build a brand. So there's a couple of really key points here. Brand value are tangible assets. They are things that are connected to the brand that can be put on a balance sheet. You wouldn't want to see the accounting formula for how those are articulated because it's complicated and I can't even understand it. But brand equity and those intangible drivers of value are not measurable. And there is no way to say, hey, if I invest philosophically in being brand-centric when I run my business and I care about all those intangible things from how I'm perceived, how all my customer experiences at all points of touch, if I do all those things, what is the return on that investment? And there is really no accounting methodology to define that. And yet the financial values are unequivocal. There are decades of data prove the value of these intangibles around brand, and they are the most significant drivers of both market performance, enterprise value, and long-term success. So that's sort of the conundrum that the C-suite has struggled with for a really long time, figuring out how do I tangibly understand the return on investment for philosophically running my business that way. And that always leads to the standard, people cutting costs or thinking that, building brand is an incremental line item on the P&L, which is really not true. It's a way you run your business. And when you start cutting back on spend and doing things cheaply or not with a quality that reflects your brand, consumers know that, people know that, and you start to chip away at the equity that you're building as a business. And for sure, that's something that you want to try to stay away from. So I could put up a lot of slides for the financial value of what this means. But this simple example from Ocean Tomos did a study and it pretty much shows that intangible brand attributes are the largest driver of enterprise value. It makes a significant on the value of a company. It makes a significant impact on market performance. And at the end of the day, regardless of how you feel you're solving a problem or any altruistic aspects of the business that you're trying to build, I believe everybody's in it to create wealth, to build value, to build something that is worth something. And in private equity, Historically, you did operational improvements in financial engineering to increase the value of a portfolio company. But in the last decade or so, there's been a much higher focus on building the intangible equity to drive value creation in private equity. A good example for that is in Brooklyn. There's a company called Bullish that is a combination of a venture capital company and a brand marketing company, and they came together under common ownership. And those are the people that were the lead investors in Peloton and Warby Parker and Casper Mattresses, and they knew that they weren't just building businesses, they were building brands. And so for a company to have that many unicorns and build those companies that went public, they understood the importance of building those intangible relationships with the marketplace that drive so much value. And it's growing, and it's getting to be more and more important.
And hey, Lyle, I have a quick question for you, and I'm sure maybe you got an answer as well. And so we've got some others in the chat that we'll kind of save towards later, but one of those that I think might help as you kind of go through the slides as well. So Adiolu asked, when you're talking about brand and brand equity here, obviously a lot of it pertains to the companies and the companies and startups and agencies that we're all building here. But how relevant is this to like personal branding? And we see on LinkedIn so many of these new, and not just LinkedIn, TikTok and Instagram and everything, so of these kind of personal influencers and the brand they've curated for themselves. Is it kind of treated and looked at the same way from Adam Robinson over, for an example, on LinkedIn, right, where he has hundreds of thousands of followers? His brand, does he view that and brand equity the same way he does with his companies? Or should those kind of be, in different buckets?
No, I think that's a great question. I think that every company has a brand and every person has a brand. And thinking of it in a human sense is really a great way to think about what a brand is. You have relationships with people that you like and that you trust and are consistent and are authentic. Those are the kind of people we want in our lives. That's also the kind of brands we want in our lives. So in days gone by, people used to say, well, B2B companies, what do I need to have a brand for? And the truth is that B2B companies need to build brand differentiation as much as anybody else, especially in the technology world where so many categories are seen as parity. And the only way to differentiate in a parity environment, even where technology is very confusing, like the AI space, is the emotional attributes of brand that differentiate you and build relationships. It's not any different with personal branding. Everybody should consider their own personal brand and their attributes and what makes them different, and their personality and their tone of manner and how they want to be presented to a marketplace. So I think, personal branding in today's social media world, especially when you have one, globally leading platform like LinkedIn, how you present yourself is really important. So I don't think it should be discounted at all. Personal brands are very real and very important. And you really want to consider that in how you post and how you write content and who you are, and whether you're aligning that with a business model or you're doing it on a personal level. It all has to connect. And the driver for that is the emotional side, right? Everybody has tangible components, and this guy with 100,000 followers may be great at his skill set, but at the same time, you want to build, positive emotional relationships. At the end of the day, that's really what drives us. We're humans. We make emotional decisions. And at the end of the day, all things being equal, I'm going to work with a person that I like, and you're going to do business with a company that you like, with the people that you connect to, the people that you trust, the people that you believe in, that you think are authentic. So yeah, I mean, and the old saying is, everybody's got a brand. The question is, are you doing anything with yours? So the idea that you neglect that is a lost opportunity to build value.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Feel free to jump in questions anytime, because I'm kind of
so maybe we could even, if you've got time, we've got a few more here too. And then before we kind of keep moving on. So Amit asked, how can I guess mystery or intrigue is this maybe the question, Amit, like, and you can clarify yourself, but like, how can that kind of be leveraged for brand, maybe whether it's a stealth startup or trying to build some type of hype around the brand itself? I
think that when you create a positioning, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a couple of slides, when you create a positioning for a business, you're covering off key strategic components before anything happens creatively, right? So you're figuring out, what's your, ICP, your ideal customer profile, you're clarifying where your context is in the market, you're articulating your core point of difference and the support and the proof that you can deliver on that point of difference. That strategic foundation becomes who you are. How you present to the market is a tactic. And if you want to do something stealth and you want to create a tease, that's a tactical strategy for how you want to message. And that really becomes a creative exercise at that point. So if you're looking to do something, you're running something stealth and you know who you're going to be because you've done the foundational strategic thinking, then going to the market and creating a campaign around something that's teasing either through social posts or any other channel. To me, that's just a creative expression of how you're creating awareness. I mean, the objective should be, how do I build excitement, awareness, anticipation of something that's coming? And what's my process for revealing that when the time comes? But all of that has to be grounded against, making sure strategically you've done the work to know what your brand is and what it stands for and what is its personality and tone and manner. Because again, equity is built with consistency over time. So if you don't do the foundational thinking, it's hard to get the other parts right. I don't know if that answers your question, Amit, but.
Yeah, no, it does. I appreciate the elaborate response. It's one of these things where I would say, especially if like a disruptive industry, right? Not many people know that vision for disruption without value behind it, right? So I think that there's a big, for me at least, in terms of like, I would say building a brand, it's more like, why are customers happy or not happy with whatever I'm providing, right? It's a two-way street. And I think getting that data and, kind of building that data set over time will, for me at least, it's more outcome or results driven industry in terms of like what's going on. But for me, in terms of med tech, so something goes good, people applaud. But something goes bad, obviously, then you still have to take account of that, right? It's called responsibility.
Yeah, accountability is very important. People today are really concerned with authenticity and transparency and a lot of intangible values where they're comfortable building relationships. So, I mean, you make a good point of it. If somebody screws up or something isn't going the way it should go, how you address that should be aligned with who you are as a brand. Responding to that in a professional way is really important.
And then we've got one more from Diana, but I think that actually might be suited towards after some of these slides, because then that'll actually help as we kind of address, AI and machine learning in this process. So yeah, back to you, Lyle. We'll keep moving on.
Yeah. So Diana, to answer your question, did you see Coke's new spot? If you saw Coke's new spot, which has horrified the internet, it was all generated through AI. AI does not replace the human for creativity or the nuance of writing language, or it just is not there. And I don't know if it really will ever actually fully get there. Maybe one day, but not today. So the impact that AI is having is really in the ideation phase, the research stage, a lot of other stuff that helps support the creative development process. It does not replace the development process, cannot replace humans, can't replace the nuance that comes from great writers and great art directors and the people that put that stuff together. Good, strong, creative people who are executing in the advertising space are using the tool, but they're not being replaced by the tool. So I put this really ugly slide up, and I know it's unreadable, but hopefully you guys can get a copy of this deck and go over it. And the important part of this is to understand the range of benefits that being brand-centric as a leadership philosophy has on a business. And it's vast. And a lot of this stuff isn't, the kind of data analytics that everybody seems over-focused on for so many years. But internally, a strong brand is something that unifies an organization. It aligns people around a common vision and mission. It helps you understand the kind of talent to attract and retain. Strong brands drive employee engagement, employee satisfaction. It reduces turnover because people know what they stand for. They know what they're doing and they know what to say, and everybody's aligned. And so having a powerful brand is a powerful tool to build culture internally. Externally, the benefits are dramatic. Strong brands create emotional differentiation. And most importantly, we got to remember that we're humans and we make emotional decisions. It improves market performance. It builds loyalty. It builds advocacy. People talk about what you do and who you are. It increases overall effectiveness with all marketing and communications activities. It grows consideration and trial, purchase intent. It drives price elasticity, meaning you can charge more. It's why Apple can charge 35% more for what's fundamentally a parity product because of the strength of their brand. It is a powerful tool. And it's also important to note that quality that goes with how you present your brand is a differentiator. People know what is good quality and what's not good quality. They know good writing and they know shitty writing, and they can tell the difference, and they know good design and they know bad design. And they may not be able to articulate it because that's not their area of strength, but they can viscerally know. You should never try to shortchange any of those processes. Use great people, use quality talent, do it right the first time, and it will make a difference. For stakeholders, it's huge. It grows assets value. It provides negotiating leverage. It increases transaction multiples when you're sitting at the table. It increases the return on investment because it's actually one of your most valuable assets. It reduces investment risk, attract premium buyers and investors. It reduces the cost of capital. It has dramatic benefits across all three of these areas: internally in your organization, externally in the marketplace for market performance, and for investors and stakeholders in businesses. So sorry for this is not being readable, but you should have this list at some point when you have a chance to go back and look at it. For founders, what's the most important stuff to remember? A strong brand will reduce your cost of capital because it changes how investors perceive the value of your business. If you've built that brand, you have a clearly differentiated position, you've told your story really well, and of course, stories resonate with people. It's a way to give up less equity when you're raising capital. It's decidedly in a multiple modifier. All things being equal, after you've measured a valuation based on a multiple of EBITDA, then you're negotiating against intangibles. And those intangibles can dramatically improve multiple. It lowers the risk in the eyes of an investor. And again, this is a visceral reaction. This is not data specific. This is if they feel that you've got that part buttoned up, they're going to both perceive higher likelihood of future success, and in their eyes, they're going to feel there's a lower risk profile when investing in your business. And it dramatically increases enterprise and shareholder value. Over 40% of Apple's market capitalization is attributed to intangible equity, which is a staggering number. I mean, that they're basically saying that, $1.6 trillion of their value is attributed to stuff that you can't easily measure. Brand love, brand preference, brand values, all of these things. So the financial stuff is very real. Positioning is the foundation for getting there. And before you do anything that are considered brand extensions, how do I communicate? How do I write my brand story or my brand narratives? How do I look? How do I sound? How do I feel? You've got to start with positioning. And positioning is a tool that's designed to force you to be single-minded. Think back. Now, we know that our memory systems only allow us to remember a limited amount of data. So the objective of positioning is to figure out what is that one single-minded way you want to be remembered in the minds of the market. And this is really important because it's the foundation for building alignment, which builds consistency, which is how you get to equity. So the positioning exercise is a strategic foundation that guides you in doing all that. And this is kind of the context with which you should think about what positioning is. If you start with what are your objectives, what are you trying to build, what is your goal, what's your vision, and you look at how well that aligns with opportunities in the market to make that vision come to life, and you find the white space competitively, you do that research and that work, that allows you to define a clear market position, opportunity, goals that help you satisfy the development of a statement. And that core single-minded statement includes 4 areas. What's my core audience definition? What is the context of the space that I sit in the market? What am I and where do I sit? What is my core point of differentiation or my benefit or my brand promise? And what is the single-minded that means I can deliver on that brand promise? That core positioning statement pretty much informs everything else that you do. If your brand architecture, your identity, your messaging and tone and manner, your values and missions and all these things don't backfit into your positioning, then you're out of alignment. So there isn't any aspect of what you do for your business that shouldn't be strategically grounded in a capitalistic endeavor. And that's what this is. Your brand identity and creative aspects, they're not arbitrarily created. They're created to appeal to a specific audience, to reinforce your context in the market, to support your value proposition. Everything has to be aligned. So positioning becomes the foundation from which everything else comes. And I know that's a big leap to get that. But when I work with startups and early stage businesses, this is the first thing that we do. And a lot of people struggle over this because they say, well, how can I be one thing? I have all these other values and I have all these other things that are important to communicate. And so you have to understand then how positioning relates to messaging, right? So the positioning is really the core attribute that you really want to imbue in the minds of both the market and your people. And that really informs what is that broad halo message. But that doesn't mean that there aren't support messaging and secondary messaging, because how people learn about who you are is a hierarchical process. And the high level messaging is designed to set the hook and say, hey, I get that. That looks really interesting. Tell me more. And if you try to spew all that stuff out at the beginning, people tend to shut down and their brains shut down. And remember, we talked about how the memory systems work. People can't remember all that. So they end up remembering nothing. So the objective of a single-minded positioning is to have that most salient hook that differentiates you and begins the dialogue and the process. So messaging, understanding how messaging works is important as it relates to positioning, which is important why we talked about how people remember. And it's like if I throw 10 balls at you at the same time, you're probably not catch them. But if I throw 2 at you, you're going to probably catch them. And our memories work the same way. It's an important dynamic. So just to kind of close on this and leave some time for questions, building equity is a leadership best practice. It is not a discretionary line item that can be cut from your P&L. It's not extra spend versus anything else. It's how you do what you do. It's how you operate. It's how you treat your employees, how you present yourself to the market, what's your tone, your personality, your tone and manner. Are you authentic? Are you genuine? Are you real? Have you built that alignment across all your constituents so that everybody gets it? Everybody understands that single-minded positioning on which you hang your hat. The idea being you put that stake in the ground, you own that position. That is your core position. And the better you do that, you shouldn't ideally need to pivot. And just like human relationships, brand relationships are equally fragile and they can break. And, you do a misstep, how you respond to that misstep is really important. But, audiences today are fickle and, the younger generations, Gen Z and Gen Alpha, they're ready to walk away and boycott you if you make a misstep in your brand, and it can have significant impact. So it's a really important asset, and it is your single most valuable asset. So that's kind of the end of this dance. I encourage you to think about coming to the innovation roundtables coming up in January, because we're going to go through this in 4 different sessions and sort of cover off a lot of stuff and actually go through doing some positioning exercises that you'll be able to do for your own company and try that on. So, but I hope this is sort of recalibrated your context about how you think about what brand is, and at least walk away from this, getting the idea that a brand is a strategy and it has to connect to stakeholder goals and objectives, market opportunity, and competitive dynamics before it's any kind of creative expression in language and colors and tone of manner and any of that kind of stuff. Brand is a strategy. Brand and your business are the same thing. All right, let's do questions.
Looks like we got one. Chris?
Yeah. Hey all. Thanks for that. That was great. And maybe this will come in the future sessions, but I had a question about, for co-founding teams or leadership teams that are, already thinking about this a lot, right? With onboarding staff, with having quarterly meetings and talking about brand and positioning and messaging. I still think it sometimes gets buried a lot. Like, how do you keep it top of mind? Are there other practices that, sometimes I'm thinking about it, but other co-founders might not be as much. And you're like, wait, but that's not our thing. And how do you kind of structurally keep it top of mind? But, recognizing that it is as important as you just laid out, and especially as you grow.
I think that, doing that core positioning work is a activity that is done with the core stakeholders of any business. And that's where the first alignment should be amongst the co-founders of a business. Everybody should be on board with that core positioning, because that positioning is going to inform what you build, feature sets, how you're going to scale a business. It all has to align with that. So there really should be no misalignment going forward. If you do that strategic work from the beginning, everybody should bless that each step of the way. So I don't see why that would break.
Perfect. Thank you, Lyle. And I've got a question from Alec here as well. So what are 3 to 5 things or a few things you'd really focus on and do first in a new business to get on the path to build a strong brand? And so kind of like with Chris and to whatever you alluded to, even what you did with us at Gilder, right? About that brand positioning, crafting that halo message. But, do you have almost like what is that first actionable step that someone would take with a new business to define that?
I'm sorry, I have my alarm's going off here, the timer, and I can't get it to stop.
No problem. Well, yeah, I know we're kind of formally at timer, so if anyone has time to stay on, please feel free.
Hit me with that question again, Brian.
Yep. So the question was, what are really 3 things that you'd focus on and do first in a new business to build a strong brand or get on the path to set up your branding?
I think the most important things really are aligning stakeholder visions, goals, and what you want to build and create, and aligning that with clearly defined market opportunity and white space competitively, because that's how you define product market fit. And if you don't have product market fit, it's hard to then figure out how the brand needs to relate to the audience. So the fundamentals that every founder is thinking about: what's the problem in the market? How am I solving that problem? What's that solution? Do I have a scalable audience there? So before anything is done creatively around the brand, that strategic foundation has to be built and done with clarity so that you know where you're going. So that's where you begin.
Great. Thank you. And so with that, Lyle, what's the best way? One, obviously, thank you for the time. We'll make sure we get the presentation out to everyone. What's the best way if someone wants to get in touch with you? Is it email, LinkedIn? How do you suggest that?
Yeah, I'm Lyle at BRANDThink, LYSLE. So I'm the only Lyle like that on LinkedIn, so I'm pretty easy to find. So happy to chat with any of you offline anytime. So please feel free to reach out.
Amazing. Well, again, and everyone, thank you for joining us. We'll have the recording out for reference, as well as the presentation and some actionable steps and suggestions for creating that messaging. So Lyle, again, thank you for joining us. Thank you all for being here. And we've got an amazing 4 sessions starting of 2025. So more to come on that front, but we'll see you guys in the next one.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Take care all.
Bye-bye.